The sprawling campus of St. Andrews University looked like something from a postcard, its red brick buildings framed by towering oak trees and lush green lawns manicured to perfection. Students in crisp blazers and scarves strolled across the quad, their voices carrying the easy confidence of those who felt they belonged. For Maya Johnson, standing at the wrought iron gates with an envelope trembling in her hands, the sight was both breathtaking and intimidating. She had dreamed of this place for as long as she could remember. Every brochure she had studied, every glossy photograph she had taped above her desk, all spoke of a world of opportunity that she had worked tirelessly to earn. But the weight of the envelope seemed heavier than it should have been, as if it already knew the answer waiting inside. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open. She had rehearsed the moment in her head countless times, imagining herself screaming in joy, calling her parents, running through the neighborhood telling everyone she was going to St. Andrews. Instead, the words blurred together as her eyes scanned the letter. "We regret to inform you." The rest of the sentence felt like a blur, her mind shutting down in self-defense. She stood frozen, the din of laughter and chatter from passing students echoing around her like cruel reminders of what she had been denied. Her heart pounded, her throat tightened, and tears threatened to escape. She thought of the endless nights she had spent studying while her friends slept, of the essays she had poured her soul into, of the community service projects where she had given her time to show she was more than grades. She had done everything right. She had done more than right. And yet, it hadn't been enough. She felt invisible, dismissed. Not for her lack of talent, but for something else she couldn't name aloud. A group of students brushed past her, one glancing at the envelope in her hand. Their eyes flickered with recognition, then indifference, as though her pain didn't matter in a place where rejection was common, yet easier for some to overcome than others. Maya clutched the letter tighter, the paper crumpling under her grip. Her dream had dissolved in the span of a single paragraph, and the rejection felt heavier than just an academic loss. It felt like a door slammed shut by a world that had never fully opened to her in the first place. She took a deep breath, blinking away tears before they could fall. With a quiet dignity, she folded the letter back into its envelope, slipping it into her bag. She turned away from the campus gates and began walking slowly down the tree-lined street. The autumn leaves crunched beneath her shoes, each step echoing the weight of disappointment. Maya didn't know what the future held, but she knew this moment would burn itself into her memory. She wasn't just walking away from a university that had rejected her. She was walking towards something else, though she couldn't yet see what it was. The bus ride home from the university felt longer than usual, though the streets of the city passed by in a blur outside Maya's window. She sat hunched in her seat, her backpack pressed against her chest as though she could hide the rejection letter deep inside it. The rumble of the engine and the faint chatter of fellow passengers did little to drown out the words echoing in her mind. "We regret to inform you." They repeated like a cruel chant, tugging at her every time she tried to think of something else. When the bus pulled up near her neighborhood, she stepped off into the cool evening air. The rows of modest houses, the cracked sidewalks, and the small corner store she had visited 1,000 times before should have comforted her. But tonight everything felt heavier. The familiar had become suffocating, as if the whole world had shifted into a shade of gray. Maya's house sat at the end of the street, its peeling paint and creaking porch a symbol of her parents' tireless efforts to make a home. As she climbed the steps, she hesitated, clutching the doorknob for a long moment before turning it. She didn't want her family to see the look on her face. Inside, the smell of cornbread and roasted chicken filled the air. Her mother, Denise, bustled around the small kitchen, humming to herself, while her father, Charles, sat at the worn dining table polishing his work boots. Her younger brother, Jordan, was sprawled on the couch with his schoolbooks, though he was more interested in doodling in the margins than studying. The warmth of the scene made the ache in Maya's chest even sharper. "Maya, baby, you're home," Denise called with a smile, wiping her hands on a towel. "Did you check the mail? Anything from St. Andrews?" Maya froze, her heart hammering. She had planned this moment so differently, imagined herself bursting through the door, waving the acceptance letter in triumph, her family wrapping her in hugs and pride. But now, standing there with the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders, she felt small. She tried to force a smile, but it faltered. "Yeah, I got it," she said softly. The room grew still. Her father's hand stopped moving. Her brother's pencil dropped onto his notebook, and her mother's hopeful expression slowly melted into concern. "And?" Denise pressed, her voice trembling between hope and fear. Maya pulled the crumpled envelope from her bag and set it on the table without a word. The silence that followed was unbearable. Her father reached for the letter, reading it carefully, his lips tightening with every line. Denise sank into the chair beside him, her eyes glistening as she looked at her daughter. "They said no," Maya whispered, finally letting the words fall. Her voice cracked and she quickly turned her face away, ashamed of the tears threatening to come. Her father placed the letter down carefully as though it were a fragile thing. Then he stood and walked over to Maya, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. "Maya, look at me," he said firmly. She hesitated, but he gently lifted her chin until their eyes met. "This is one school. One. Their decision doesn't define you. It doesn't erase all the work you've done, all the brilliance you've shown. Do you hear me?" Denise reached out and took Maya's hand, her voice soft but unwavering. "Baby, they don't get to decide your worth. You are more than enough. And if St. Andrews couldn't see that, then it's their loss, not yours." Jordan, quiet until now, pushed his glasses up his nose and added in a small voice, "You're still my hero, Maya. You always will be." The dam broke then and tears spilled down Maya's cheeks. But this time, they weren't just from pain. They carried relief, too. She let her parents pull her into their arms, feeling their warmth surround her like a shield. For the first time since opening the letter, she felt a spark inside her chest. Faint, but real. She realized something important in that moment. The rejection hurt, but it wasn't the end of her story. Her family's unwavering belief in her lit a fire deep within. She wasn't going to let a single university decide her destiny. That night after dinner, Maya sat at her desk staring at her textbooks. The sting of rejection still lingered, but now there was determination underneath it, burning brighter than before. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow, "I'll prove them wrong." The weeks that followed were some of the hardest Maya had ever faced. Every morning, she forced herself out of bed before dawn, her alarm buzzing in the dark, while the rest of the house still slept. She sat at her small desk by the window with a stack of textbooks and notebooks, pushing herself through page after page of material. The rejection letter from St. Andrews remained pinned to her corkboard above her desk, not as a wound anymore, but as a constant reminder of the promise she had made to herself, to prove them wrong. School was no easier. Walking through the crowded hallways of her high school, she could feel the weight of whispers that weren't even always there, but which her mind convinced her were aimed at her. Some of her classmates who had heard about the rejection gave her sympathetic smiles that felt almost patronizing. A few made offhand comments like, "Guess they're really competitive, huh?" Or, "Maybe next time," as if her dreams had been dismissed as casually as they'd spoken. Maya clenched her jaw and forced herself not to react, channeling her frustration into her studies instead. Her teachers, however, saw something different. Mr. Ramirez, her history teacher, noticed the way her essays grew sharper and more passionate, brimming with critical thought. Mrs. Lee, her math teacher, began to hand back tests with nearly perfect scores, often underlining her solutions with notes like, "Excellent work," or, "This is graduate-level thinking." Their encouragement didn't erase the sting of rejection, but it gave Maya a small reassurance. Her hard work wasn't invisible. At home, the support from her family never wavered. Her mother made sure that dinner was always waiting, even if Maya stayed late at the library. Her father sometimes sat beside her at the kitchen table, polishing his boots or sorting through bills while she studied, his quiet presence reminding her she wasn't alone in her fight. And Jordan, who usually teased her about being too serious, surprised her one evening by sneaking into her room with a handmade sign that read, "Future Valedictorian, don't forget us little people." She laughed through her tears, taping the sign next to the rejection letter. Still, the pressure weighed heavily on her. There were nights when the numbers on the page blurred from exhaustion, when her essays felt flat and uninspired, when doubt crept in like a shadow whispering that maybe the university had been right. During those moments, she would close her eyes and remember the look in her mother's eyes the day she brought home the rejection letter, a look not of disappointment, but of fierce belief. She clung to that memory as a lifeline. As the months rolled on, her determination crystallized into routine. She began volunteering at the local library, tutoring younger students who struggled with reading and math. At first, it was just a way to keep her mind engaged, but soon she discovered that she loved the work. Seeing the spark of understanding in a child's eyes when a concept finally clicked reminded her of why education mattered so deeply. She wasn't just chasing validation from a university anymore. She was building something larger, something meaningful. One evening, as she packed up her notes at the library, Mrs. Alvarez, the head librarian, approached her. "Maya," she said warmly, "I've watched you these past few months. You're not just studying, you're growing into a leader. You have something rare, something that no rejection letter can take away." Those words lingered with Maya long after she left the library that night. For the first time, she began to realize that her journey wasn't just about overcoming a single rejection. It was about carving her own path, about becoming someone stronger, someone capable of more than she had ever imagined. And so, while others might have seen a door closing, Maya began to see the outlines of a much bigger world opening before her. By the time senior year began, Maya's determination had transformed into something almost unshakable. Her reputation in school had changed too. The girl who once quietly blended into the background was now known as the one who never gave up. Her teachers admired her relentless pursuit of excellence, and her classmates, even the ones who had once made dismissive comments, now looked to her as an example of what perseverance could achieve. Maya spent her mornings in the library before classes started, her afternoons buried in extracurricular activities, and her evenings tutoring. She had joined the debate team after much hesitation, encouraged by Mr. Ramirez, who insisted that her voice deserved to be heard. At first, she stumbled over her arguments, her nerves threatening to undo her careful preparation. But with every match, she grew sharper, her confidence rising as she dismantled counterpoints with poise and precision. By the end of the season, she wasn't just another team member. She was a leader who often carried her team to victory. Her volunteer work at the library deepened as well. The children she tutored began to look up to her, their parents often stopping by to thank her. One little girl, Aisha, once slipped Maya a crayon drawing of the two of them sitting together with books spread across a table. Above their heads, Aisha had scrawled in uneven letters, "Maya makes me smart." Maya folded the drawing and tucked it into her binder, carrying it everywhere as a quiet reminder that her effort wasn't just for her own future. It was already changing lives. At home, the energy shifted too. Jordan often helped quiz her late into the night, though he grumbled about missing video game time. Her mother sometimes paused while folding laundry to listen as Maya practiced speeches aloud, nodding with tears brimming in her eyes. Her father, who rarely spoke much, started leaving little notes on her desk before leaving for work. One read, "Proud of you, keep pushing." Another simply said, "They don't define you." But senior year wasn't without its trials. Between AP classes, college applications, debate tournaments, and volunteer work, Maya was stretched thin. There were nights when her body ached with fatigue, when her eyes burned from staring at essay drafts, when her spirit wavered under the pressure of being everyone's inspiration. Once, after losing a debate match that she had poured her heart into, she locked herself in the bathroom at school and cried silently, gripping the edge of the sink until her knuckles turned white. In that moment, the weight of rejection, expectations, and her own fear of failure threatened to crush her. Yet even in her lowest points, something inside her refused to give up. That evening, instead of going home defeated, she walked straight to the library and sat down with Aisha, who greeted her with a wide smile and said, "I waited for you. I want to be as smart as you someday." Those words washed over Maya like a healing balm. She realized that setbacks were temporary, but the impact she made on others could last far beyond her own struggles. As the year drew closer to graduation, whispers began to circle among teachers and administrators. Maya's grades were impeccable, her extracurriculars impressive, her leadership undeniable. Her name came up again and again in conversations about the class valedictorian. Though no official announcement had been made, Maya could sense the shift. Her hard work was being recognized. One evening, after finishing her homework, she stood by her corkboard, where the rejection letter from St. Andrews still hung. Next to it was Jordan's playful future valedictorian sign, now faded from months on the wall. Maya touched both papers gently, her heart swelling with the knowledge that she was proving them wrong. Not just the university, but every single voice that had ever doubted her. She whispered to herself, almost like a prayer, "I'm not done yet. Would you like me to continue with an equally detailed Chapter 5, keeping the same emotional depth and gradual build toward her eventual triumph?" Spring arrived with a rush of blossoms and the air buzzing with both anticipation and nerves. College acceptance letters were beginning to trickle in, and Maya's classmates were abuzz, comparing envelopes and refreshing email inboxes as though their lives depended on it. For Maya, each day felt like a delicate balance between hope and dread. She had sent her applications to several universities, some prestigious, some closer to home, and even a few that had been suggested by her guidance counselor as safe options. Every morning, she lingered by the mailbox before school, her heart racing when she saw anything with the university's seal. The first letter that arrived was from a mid-sized college in her state. She unfolded it with trembling hands and gasped. It was an acceptance. Her family crowded around, hugging her tightly. It wasn't her first choice, but it was proof that someone somewhere believed in her. The following week, another letter came, and then another. One by one, universities that had once felt out of reach were saying yes. But Maya still carried the shadow of St. Andrews University, the place that had dismissed her without hesitation. Despite her growing pile of acceptance letters, the sting of that rejection hadn't fully left her. At times, she would catch herself wondering if she was truly good enough, if perhaps the rejection had been right after all. Yet each time the doubt rose, she countered it with action. Another late night studying, another afternoon tutoring, another debate practice where she refused to let her nerves win. Her teachers rallied behind her, proudly announcing her achievements in class, and her principal even invited her to speak at a student leadership event. Maya took the stage nervously, the spotlight hot on her skin, but as she looked out at the younger students' eager faces, she felt a calm certainty settle in. She spoke about perseverance, about rejection, and about refusing to let anyone else's opinion define your worth. When she finished, the applause felt different, genuine, not just polite. Several students ran up to her afterward, saying she had inspired them. Her family remained her strongest support. Her mother often stayed up waiting for her when she came home late from library volunteering, sliding a plate of reheated food across the table and listening as Maya poured out her thoughts. Her father continued leaving notes, short, quiet affirmations that always seemed to appear when she needed them most. Jordan, in his usual teasing way, started calling her Professor Maya, but behind the jokes, there was pride in his eyes. Then came the day of the big announcement. The school gym buzzed with energy as students gathered for the end-of-year assembly. Teachers lined the walls, whispering and smiling knowingly. The principal, dressed in her best navy suit, took the stage, holding a folded piece of paper that seemed to hum with importance. She spoke of resilience, excellence, and leadership, words that seemed to hang in the air like a drum roll. Maya's heart pounded as she listened, each word pushing her closer to the edge of something monumental. Finally, the principal unfolded the paper and announced, "This year's valedictorian is Maya Johnson." The gym erupted in cheers. For a moment, Maya couldn't move. She sat frozen, her breath caught in her throat, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. Then Jordan let out a loud whoop, and her friends pulled her to her feet. She walked toward the stage in a haze, the sound of applause washing over her like a tidal wave. Standing at the podium, Maya looked out at her peers, at the teachers who had guided her, at her family beaming in the audience. She thought of the rejection letter still pinned to her corkboard, of the nights she cried over essays, of the children at the library who believed in her. She realized that this moment was not just about proving the university wrong. It was about proving to herself and to everyone else that her worth had never been theirs to decide. She didn't give a speech that day. Those words would come later at graduation, But as she stood there, hands trembling and tears welling in her eyes, the entire gym seemed to understand what her journey had meant. Would you like me to now write Chapter 6 with the same level of detail, her actual graduation ceremony, and the emotional buildup toward her valedictorian speech? The morning of graduation dawned warm and bright, sunlight streaming through Maya's curtains as though the day itself was determined to celebrate her. She woke before her alarm, her mind already buzzing with nerves and excitement. On the chair by her desk, her cap and gown lay neatly pressed, the deep blue fabric seeming heavier with meaning than with weight. She ran her hand over it, feeling the roughness of the tassel between her fingers. This was more than just fabric. It was proof of everything she had endured, every sleepless night, every doubt she had pushed aside. Her family filled the house with energy and chatter. Her mother moved through the kitchen, humming as she set out a special breakfast of pancakes and fruit, while her father wore a smile so wide it seemed permanent. Jordan, dressed in his best shirt, teased her about tripping on stage, but followed it with a quick hug that spoke volumes. They all posed for pictures in the living room, the flash of the camera catching Maya's nervous grin, her mother's proud tears, and her father's hand resting firmly on her shoulder. The school auditorium had been transformed for the occasion. Rows of chairs filled the gymnasium floor, while the bleachers overflowed with families waving and calling out names. The stage at the front gleamed under bright lights, draped with banners and school colors. A long table held the diplomas, and the podium stood waiting, its microphone angled toward whoever would soon address hundreds of expectant faces. Maya walked in line with her classmates, the air thick with excitement, and the scent of fresh flowers, from corsages pinned to gowns. As she took her seat at the front, the weight of the moment pressed down on her. She wasn't just graduating. She was the valedictorian. Soon she would stand before everyone, her teachers, her peers, her family, and deliver the speech she had spent nights perfecting. Her stomach tightened as she imagined the sea of faces, the silence that would fall when she began to speak. For a moment, she wished she could simply disappear into the crowd, but then she looked at her parents, seated proudly in the audience, and something steadied her. The ceremony began with the national anthem, followed by speeches from administrators and board members. Each word passed in a blur until the principal finally called her name. Valedictorian, Maya Johnson. The applause was thunderous. Maya rose slowly, her legs trembling but determined. She walked to the stage, each step measured and deliberate, her heart beating so loudly she could hear it in her ears. At the podium, she took a deep breath and looked out at the crowd. Faces blurred at first, but then she saw her mother wiping tears, her father's hand raised in encouragement, Jordan grinning as though his cheeks might split. Her classmates leaned forward, some smiling, others curious, all waiting. Maya began to speak. Her voice wavered at first, but with each word, it grew stronger. She talked about struggle, about rejection, about how failure wasn't the end but a beginning. She didn't name the prestigious university that had turned her away, but the weight of it hung in every sentence. Instead, she focused on resilience, on the power of believing in yourself even when others don't. She told stories of studying late at night, of tutoring younger children who taught her just as much as she taught them, of the community that had lifted her up. The audience was silent, captivated. Then, as she closed her speech with the words, "Our worth is not given to us by institutions or titles. It is built in how we rise, how we keep moving, and how we refuse to let anyone silence our dreams." The auditorium erupted in applause. She stepped back from the podium, tears stinging her eyes as the sound surrounded her. It wasn't just applause, it was recognition. It was her classmates, her teachers, her family telling her she had been right to keep going, that she had been seen, and that her voice mattered. As she returned to her seat, her diploma waiting in the hands of the principal, Maya felt lighter than she ever had before. This moment wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of everything that came next. Would you like me to now finish with Chapter 7, showing her triumphant return years later, when the university that once rejected her is forced to honor her success? Years later, The sprawling campus of the prestigious university looked exactly as Maya remembered it from the day she had once toured its grounds. Ivy climbing the stone walls, statues of scholars gazing down at passersby, and students hurrying to class with books tucked under their arms. Yet, as Maya stepped out of the sleek black car that had been arranged to pick her up, everything felt different. She was no longer a nervous high school senior hoping for acceptance. She was Maya Johnson, a graduate with honors from another respected institution, a published researcher, and a rising leader in her field. Today, she was not here as an applicant. She was here as the keynote speaker for the university's commencement ceremony. The letter of invitation had shocked her at first. She had reread it several times, the university's seal glinting at the top of the page. They spoke of her remarkable achievements, her contribution to academic excellence, and how she was an inspiration to the next generation. The very same institution that had once dismissed her application without a second thought was now seeking her presence to inspire their own graduates. She had agreed, not out of pettiness, but because she understood the importance of moments like this, moments that could ripple outward and change perceptions, both for herself and for those who would come after her. Inside the grand auditorium, faculty members in their ceremonial robes gathered at the front, while students in caps and gowns filled every row of seats. The atmosphere was electric with pride and anticipation. As Maya was led backstage, she caught sight of professors whispering about her, some with recognition, others with curiosity. Her name was printed boldly on the program, right under the words, Commencement Keynote Address, Maya Johnson. When her name was finally announced, the applause that rose was powerful, echoing off the high ceilings. She walked across the stage with poise, her gown swaying around her ankles, her head held high. A hush fell over the room as she stood at the podium, gazing out at hundreds of young faces. For a moment, she thought of that rejection letter from years ago, the one that had told her she wasn't enough. She let that memory sit in her chest like a weight, and then released it with her first words. She spoke not of bitterness, but of perseverance. She told the graduates about rejection, about the sting of being overlooked, and how easy it is to believe that a single decision defines your worth. Then she explained how she chose to keep striving, to pour herself into her studies, into her community, into proving not to them, but to herself, that her dreams mattered. Her voice was strong, steady, but tinged with the deep emotion of someone who had lived every word. She reminded them that no institution, no admissions board, no person sitting behind a desk could dictate the potential that lived inside of them. The audience hung on her every word. Professors leaned forward, listening intently. Parents in the crowd nodded with tears in their eyes. Graduates, many of them about to step into the uncertainty of the world beyond the campus gates, looked at her as though she were handing them a key they hadn't known they were missing. When she concluded her speech with the words, "What once felt like rejection was simply redirection, and it brought me to exactly where I was meant to be," the hall erupted in applause, louder and longer than any other moment of the ceremony. People rose to their feet, clapping until their palms were red, cheering until their voices cracked. As Maya stepped down from the podium, a few faculty members approached her to shake her hand, their expressions filled with admiration and a hint of shame. They knew, even if they weren't the ones who had written that letter years ago, that the university had once failed to see her light. And now, here she was, shining so brightly that no one could ignore it. After the ceremony, a line of graduates formed, each waiting to thank her personally. Many of them spoke of how her story mirrored their own fears, how her words had lifted something heavy off their shoulders. Maya listened to each one, offering encouragement, hugs, and the simple reassurance that their journeys, too, were valid. When she finally left the campus that day, the sun dipped low over the horizon, casting the ivy-covered walls in gold. For the first time, she looked at the university not with longing, but with peace. She had not needed their acceptance to become who she was. Ironically, it was they who needed her now, to inspire, to lead, to remind them what true resilience and brilliance looked like. Maya smiled as she walked away, knowing that the girl who once stood outside these gates would have been proud of the woman she had become.